are talking Eight-Legged Freaks, which is also known as ARAC Attack. This is a 2002 movie directed and co-written by LEGGED, and it stars David Arquette, but it's probably most notable for an early role for Scarlett Johansson. Now, this was a medium-budget movie, around $30 million, but was the aim of it was to try and capture a kind of a knowingly B-movie film, but have it on a kind of a somewhat larger budget. So the story focuses on this small, sleepy American town in kind of in some type of rural part of America, and there is toxic waste that gets spilt into this kind of local lake, which ends up feeding into this spider farm, and these spiders are affected, then grow to an enormous size and ultimately attack the town. David Arquette's character plays a guy who has left the town when he was younger and came back, only right to be smack dab in the middle of this ARAC attack. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So first of all, let's talk about what works in the movie. So obviously, a medium budget, $30 million, not quite a kind of a standard blockbuster budget, but bigger than the majority of the kind of the straight-to-video fare, and as such, it's kind of like watching a B-movie, but with a somewhat larger scale. Wide open spaces. We have a lot of extras. We have, for example, towards the end of the movie, everyone kind of like piling into the kind of the local mall, and we get lots of kind of wide-angle shots and things like this with variety of extras and kind of like and location designs that you probably wouldn't get in a genuine kind of B movie. So it is interesting to kind of see this on a kind of slightly larger scale. And obviously it has a little bit of a high quality in regards to cast as well. David Arquette, obviously probably most notable, known for around that time for his turn in the Scream movies. But you've also got a few other familiar faces as well. Obviously, Scarlett Johansson, but this was kind of obviously before she was famous, and she doesn't have a huge role in the movie. She plays the daughter of the kind of the love interest for David Arquette's character. The special effects are mainly CGI. Now, the early 2000s, this is kind of the boom of CGI CGI effects, and they were everywhere, and they have kind of mixed results. But looking at it in today's eyes, it's obviously kind of CGI, and obviously it's easy to kind of pick apart today. But, bear in mind when this came out in 2002, I would say some of the effects are still pretty good, especially in regards to the larger spiders. So we have a large tarantula that gets kind of overgrown, and there's also the kind of like the queen orb weaver spider. Those two are the kind of the two larger spiders, and to me they are the best rendered, and therefore look the most impressive when we see the CGI. There's a sequence where this tarantula attacks like a kind of a caravan, and it's impressive. Some of the other effects for the smaller spiders don't look quite as impressive and do look like CGI. We'll come on to that. But there are, the CGI is a little bit of a mixed bag, and we do have to kind of incorporate the time where it kind of was made and stuff. The body count in this movie is extremely high. Hell of a lot of people end up getting killed off in this movie, and when we kind of go into the finale, we kind of go into the Orb Weaver's lair with all these people kind of cocooned up. It is very, very eerie, and even though this movie is relatively bloodless, the thought of these people getting cocooned and their insides sort of sucked out is kind of graphic in a way, although you didn't see it on the screen, but we kind of know what's happening, so therefore it is it is a little horrifying at times in regards to that. And obviously, if you're not a fan of spiders, if you have arachnophobia, you're probably not going to be wanting to go into this movie. The action's actually quite fast-paced. We have a variety of different kind of spiders, from trapdoor spiders, jumping spiders, all that prove a unique challenge to in different kind of points of the movie. The movie's also knowingly kind of jokey. Now, again, so humour is somewhat subjective, so some of it works and some of it may not for certain people. There's a hell of a lot of references in this movie, and again, I find that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it's quite fun to hear all these kind of little nods, but at the same time, I do think it maybe goes a little bit overboard with it. But I've got to say, I like David Arquette in this leading role. Makes for a kind of a likeable, kind of just an average Joe type character. maybe what doesn't work, just to go over what I've said, some of the humour I think is very broad, and it almost feels like this movie is kind of aiming for quite a young audience, despite the fact this is, you know, a relatively horrific kind of subject matter in a lot of ways. The jokes sometimes aim for the lowest common denominator. I think maybe the thing I feel like horror fans maybe will not like about this movie is, as I've mentioned, it is completely bloodless. There's a hell of a lot of people get killed in this movie, and we do see a couple of like emaciated corpses, but there's no gore whatsoever in this movie. And the kind of the gory ways that people would die in this situation, it's noticeable that there's not one drop of blood in this movie, and it ends up being a little weird. Also, there's a little weird is just the kind of like I think the movie's trying to go for like a Gremlins tone, where these spiders seem to kind of make these little noises and almost seem like they're communicating with cute little kind of whistles and coos and things like this, and in sometimes roaring. And it's kind of like when you get a great white roaring in like things like Jaws 4, for example. It's just silly, and I think that's by today's audiences, you can kind of look back on this and think it's kind of silly. The CGI, and again, it's kind of just the flip side of what I've said, doesn't look good on some of the sequences. There's also just kind of like lots of meaningless deaths when I feel some of the kind of like we didn't get to know some of the characters particularly well, and no one really of note I would say bites the bullet in any kind of meaningful way, so it lacks kind of any real kind of emotional punch. Overall, I've got to say, it's a kind of a fun movie, and it does harken back to, obviously, its kind of B-movie roots, or at least that's kind of where it wants to be. But obviously, it wanting to be a successful kind of like cinema release movie, it wanted to have the lowest rating possible, and this really neuters it to a degree, so it kind of feels almost like you're watching a cartoon. And as kind of likeable as David Arquette is, I'm not quite sure he was leading man material, to be quite honest. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It's about an average kind of like monster flick. I think it's an enjoyable film, but I don't know if it's particularly kind of memorable in any kind of meaningful way, at least. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.